I would love to see a real gauge cluster with analog gauges instead of a screen. We'll go this way. Oh God, this car. Welcome back. I'm Tedward, and welcome back to my 2001 E39 M5, which this is my last drive of the season. God, I love the turning radius on this car. And because it's my last drive of the season, I'm driving it back to Garage 42, where it will be stored for the winter. And actually, it's going to be on a stack with a couple of my other cars, because after buying my Lexus GX 460, well, that is going to do the winter duty. I don't need to drive the Honda Civic Type R in the snow anymore. And if that Honda Civic Type R were rear-wheel drive, it would absolutely see the snow, because that would be a fun car to go drifting in. But because it's a front-wheel drive kind of track-oriented thing, and it doesn't have even a handbrake, it's not fun in the snow. It's capable, and it'll do what it wants to do, but there's just no reason to put it through that kind of trauma. I don't want to get it rusty. It saw one winter. I did my best to keep it as clean as I could. And then that's that. We'll keep the Porsche, the E39, and the Honda in as good shape as we can, and we'll let the Lexus do its thing and take the brunt of the winter abuse. But you know, they've just gotten to the point where it's getting below freezing. We've been in a drought, so they haven't really salted too much, but it is time to get this thing off the road, because tonight the snow is coming. And trust me, I wish I could just throw a set of Blizzaks on this and play and dance in the snow, but the car's too nice. It's funny, when I bought this E39 like 10 years ago, maybe longer. Oh my goodness, I think it's maybe 12 years ago. That's a long time. When I bought this car, it was a good example, not a phenomenal example. But over time, this has become a better and better example, because it hasn't really degraded. I've only put 20,000 miles on the car in the last 12 years, and I've taken pretty darn good care of it. I've always stored it in the winter. I don't drive it in the winter. It never was driven in the winter. And if you're not from New England or some sort of like climate where salt is put on roads, then you just don't quite understand why that matters so much, because it doesn't matter what you do. Entropy will get you. Oxidation will occur. But over the years, I was just talking to a guy who owned an E39 M5, and over the years, this car has kind of been on my keep or sell list on different sides of that chart. And more often than not now, especially now, it's on the keep list, because I'm just wondering, is it because I'm getting older and I want for less? I'm not always hunting for the next new thing, whether it be a GT3 or an M5, or is it because cars today are just less appealing to me? I used to go absolutely bonkers when a new version of a thing that I liked came out. If there was a new GT3, a facelifted GT3, if there was a new M5, it was like a kid waiting for their N64 on Christmas. I needed it. I needed it, and I wanted to be around it, and I wanted to find any way to get my grubby little hands on it. And that has just not really been the case in a while. And it's not to say that the cars aren't good. I love GT3s. I like the M5 CS and the M5 competition of the previous generation. I haven't driven the new one yet. But I gotta say, I'm not making phone calls to arrange that drive, let's say. Let's just put it that way. I'm not dying to drive it. When I drive it, I'll make an assessment and I'll enjoy it, I'm sure. But there has been a change in terms of, for me at least, the desirability to drive certain things. Now, I'm also not a purist in the sense, like there's people who are save the manual stands who, if ever faced with the proposition of driving an automatic transmission, would turn up their nose at it and be insulted by the fact that you would even suggest that a computer rose the gears for you. I'm not like that. I still appreciate a PDK and a DCT. In fact, I owned a DCT E92 M3 because, frankly, I thought that was the better suited transmission option for the car. You know, you can't put me in a 600 LT and get me to say nasty things about that gearbox. It's fantastic. But there is something about individual throttle bodies. There is something about a naturally aspirated V8 that wants to rev up a bit. And there is something about this sort of wolf in sheep's clothing vibe of an E39 M5 because first and foremost, it's a mid-sized luxury sedan. And that, to me, is incredibly charming that you get this package with a really great motorsports-inspired engine. And the S62 is genuinely a motorsports engine. This, even throughout the days when they had S65s available to them, this is what they were racing in BMW series because it was reliable. These things are beefy. These things are grunty. They have torque. But outside of that, this engine also lends itself to being really luxurious because unlike the S65 and the E92 and E90 M3s, it doesn't need to be revved out. I'm at 1500 RPM. I'm in fourth gear. I can just apply a little bit of throttle. It's got torque. Whereas in the E92, one of the reasons why I thought that DCT suited that car so well was because oftentimes you would need to just jump down 2 or 3 gears to get in the power curve, to get in the rev range that you needed to actually accelerate and do the thing you were looking for. Whereas in this car, you could probably run most racetracks just in third gear. Like you'd top it out, but on a straightaway, but enter a corner, exit a corner. You could probably do it all within the realm of third gear, which is so cool. A lot of people put some gnarly exhausts on these cars, which is totally fine. The reason why I've never modified it is twofold. One, I love how sort of subtle and quiet it is when you're cruising around, but also, listen to this. That sort of OEM grunt that you get from this engine when you get into it, suddenly there's something special there. It's not over the top. It's not a Mustang or a Camaro shouting at you. It's just this subtle in the background, and then it's alive, and that's wonderful. The second reason I haven't modified this is because the exhaust is essentially one piece from after the headers all the way back. It's huge. And in order to modify this, if you were to do, say, an axle back or just mufflers, you've got to cut it, and then you've got to clamp it. I love that this is still intact. It's one piece. So if I were to do an exhaust in this car, I would simply remove this one, hang it on the wall, and then buy another one that's been cut and play with that. Pretty wild to see the nomenclature on the new 540. There's a big 5 and then a little 40i. So it's weird. Like, to me, that's the way X7 and X5 have been operating, where it's like an X7 M40i, X7 M50i. That is now a 540i, not a 540i. How bizarre. Are the greatest days of like consumer motorsports products behind us? I hope not. I hope not. I don't see as much excitement for new products anymore, even in the supercar world. And it's possible that YouTube is the reason for this. We used to rarely see any kind of supercar. I never was surrounded by Ferraris or Lamborghinis or anything of this sort unless I was at a special event or in a particularly wealthy place like London. If I'm in Knightsbridge, sure, there's going to be some interesting things hanging around. But if I'm driving around Massachusetts, chances are I'm not going to see much in the way of supercars. But today, supercars are a little more ubiquitous. They make a lot more of them. And just for example, in the late 90s, early 2000s, Bentley was selling like 400 cars globally per year. 400 per year. So it would have been pretty special to see a Bentley. It would have been wild that your neighbor owned something like that. Where today, you could own a Bentayga, you could own a Mulsanne, you could own a Continental. Like, these cars are out there. They're still wildly expensive, and it's a fashion statement. It's a statement of wealth. But it is not the sort of rare thing that it used to be. And I wonder if that's contributed to a mild lack of excitement for the next generation of these cars. Get these angel eyes going. They're complicated now, and it used to be simple. It was like a carnal need for a V12 in an Aventador or a Murcielago. It was a carnal need for a V10 in a Gallardo or a Huracan. I don't see that carnal need for a hybridized Ferrari, like a 296 GTB. Probably one of the fastest cars out there. It puts the numbers down, but I think the fact that residuals are dropping on some of these cars so quickly is a real indicator that it's not me getting older and becoming jaded as an auto journalist or as someone who just drives all these cars. It is the market being less enthused with something that is a little less blunt and absurd, because now it's very curated. It's the difference between being an astronaut on an Apollo mission versus going on a Blue Origin flight. And I think that sometimes the new cars feel a little too computerized. And that's it. It's not to say it's a bad thing. I mean, I want to go to space. I want to drive a 10,000 RPM V8 from Lamborghini. That actually does very much excite me, the new Huracan successor, which I can't pronounce. It's like the Temerio. I'll get there. It'll probably take me a year until it comes out, and then I'll know how to say it. But I am excited about some of these things, but I do think that there is going to be a little bit of a walk back on some of the technology. And I hope that translates to a walk back on technology, especially when it comes to gauge clusters. I would love to see needles again. I would love to see a real gauge cluster with analog gauges instead of a screen. It's fine. Give me the Apple CarPlay screen down here. I am 100% on board for that. I love the screen in my Honda. I love the screen in my GX. But I would like to see something interesting, because there's something to be said about looking at a car's interior, seeing a dashboard when the car is off and getting excited about it. When this car is off, it still has the faces of these gauges. It is still in a Rolex. It is still an Omega with hands, needles. This is not. And when it's dormant, it's just black. There's nothing that interesting. But I mean, yes, it's incredibly functional and it has more capability than a Rolex. It's my running watch. We'll go this way. Oh God, this car. And it has this differential. It's all mechanical. Look at that. This is all third gear, man. And what I love about this car is it really highlights the idea of a time and a place. We're going past some houses. We're going to shut it down, cool it. I don't think anyone's looking out their window being like, who's making that noise? A, because there's not a whole lot of noise. And B, because it's unassuming. It's a blue BMW, carbon black. But every time I drive this car, I'm reminded of why I've kept it, because this is my calibration tool. This is the car I keep to remind myself of what I enjoy about cars, what I enjoy about driving. And it's not perfect. I should have taken that turn. It's not perfect. It's not the perfect car. It has shortcomings, whether it's maybe this is not a GT3 shifter. It's not a snicky kind of shifter. And the steering is a recirculating ball system. So it's not gonna be this perfect thing. But what it does remind me of is when cars had a really specific intent to achieve like a perfect amount of driver delight with absurd performance. Because right now, if we had like a C5 Corvette ahead of us, we'd keep up. Take it nice and easy. Oh my goodness, I wish this was my commute home. Ah, oh, man. That's the stuff. And the thing is, there's faster cars. But it doesn't matter if you can't feel it or enjoy it in the same way as some of the classics. And I think tactility is going to be the next frontier. A return to tactility will be the next frontier of the automakers who want to make sports cars for people who are enthusiasts. And we're already seeing a little bit of a throwback with the hypercar market. We're seeing Pagani, we're seeing Koenigsegg introduce sort of manual gearboxes. The Koenigsegg one, obviously absurd and can be an automatic and a manual gearbox. That's crazy tech, but we're not going to spend $4 or $5 million on a car. I certainly cannot, and most people can't. It's just the way it goes. But what it shows, though, is that even people in the upper echelons of income are speaking with their money when it comes to what they want. And there looks to be like they want cars that feel like something. And the number of cars that feel like something today have been dwindling. I think my Civic Type R is a great example of a car that still feels like something. It's one of the reasons why I own that car. It's very enjoyable to drive because of its tactility. But I would love to see automakers introduce feedback into the cars in a way that we had in the early 2000s, because I do genuinely believe that people value those early 2000s cars in ways that I don't know that anyone predicted. I mean, when we look at what fetches the most money, you've got like 458 Italias, you've got 997, 996 GT3s. A GT3 RS, a 3.8 liter, is already, $200,000 and north. And then you get into the 4 liters, which are limited editions, and you're looking at anywhere from $600,000 to $1 million. So these things obviously matter to people. I've kept the miles off of this car for a couple reasons. One was because I wanted to preserve it in a way that made it so I didn't have to do as much maintenance on it. If you don't like daily drive things all the time, then yeah, like certain things last longer, like brakes and suspension components and things like that. The other is just because I never was sure if I was keeping it. I was never sure if it was going to be the car I wanted to keep. And you lose resale value with the odometer, right? You stack on, ooh, we got Volkswagen people over here, Audi and Volkswagen people. If you stack on those miles, well, you're losing money. The good news is I bought this car so long ago that pretty much no matter what I do, I will break even on it. But now that I kind of look at it differently, like this is my calibration tool, like this is something that I just want to use forever. And I don't have any money wrapped into it. It's not like I owe any money on the car. I bought it cash. I honestly might be more proud to put 100,000 miles on this car now than I was, or more likely to put 100,000 miles on this car now than I was, a couple years ago. Because I can't really see myself selling it anymore. I really want this to be part of my collection. I really want this to be something that stays with me and allows me to kind of at any time jump in and have the driving experience of a luxury sports sedan the way it was really meant to be had. So anyway, now coming up to Garage 42, nicely camouflaged back here. But this always sneaks up on you a little bit. Let's see, gates open, good. Go across the moat. And head on up and see our friends. Ooh, hello. Got a nice thing here. So that's a wrap on 2024 for the E39 M5. It's gonna go back into Garage 42, and my buddy Chris, who has the Depreciation Society cars, he's just bringing his Maybach back to jump into the S8 because it's gonna snow tomorrow, and this is the perfect snow car with the all-wheel drive system. Anyway, I'm thrilled because Ryan is going to take this. He's the detailer. He's going to clean up any salt that I may have gotten on it today, which is probably almost nothing. And then it's going to go into the stackers, which is pretty exciting. So It should come into this wash bay here. There's my dad coming to pick me up. And then, ooh, that's a charming addition to Garage 42. We'll maybe talk about that pretty soon. Didn't expect to see that today. But this place is starting to fill out pretty darn good. I think they're at 50% capacity now, so it is starting to look quite full. I've got my Honda Civic Type R, my 911 up there, and then Eddie's Camaro. The M5 is going to come and live with a couple other beautiful BMWs, and they've even got room for some of the giant trucks and an ice cream truck. The Unimog lives here, but anyway, I'm just psyched that I have a safe place to store the things. We've got Ryan to make sure that they are clean and salt-free. So now that this side is almost filling up, we got to fill up that side, but it is happening faster than expected. So anyway, I'm glad that I can come back, record in my studio, and keep an eye on my toys throughout the winter. Thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing, and I'll have a lot more stories coming back from Garage 42. I'll see you in the next one.